what adventure game does not have a boomerang? Here we're going to create a very simple one. The concept is to have the player interact with a collection object that creates a projectile object that will then travel out from the player, destroy itself, creating the return object that returns to the player and destroys itself. Let's begin. The first thing we are going to need to do is to create some new objects. For this demonstration, we will need 3 objects. We will create our first object, and this will be our collection object. So I will name this one OBJ Boomerang Get. Now, this is the object that, in my game, tells the player he is capable of using the boomerang item. So you'll need some sprites. I will assign a simple sprite that I already have made specifically for my mock-up boomerang. You may use whatever sprites you like. So once we have our sprite selected, we can get into telling this collection object what it needs to do when the player interacts with it. We will need to add a create, and we will need to add a step event. Inside of our create and step event, we will need to put the following. For the step event, you don't need much code here. In fact, this is all that you will need for the step event. Zoom in a bit so that you can see. Now, what this piece of code does is tell our collection object if the player interacts with it, the global variable that determines whether or not the player has the boomerang will be ticked, and has boomerang will essentially be true, giving the player the ability to use said boomerang. And after that, we want it to destroy itself so that the player cannot repeatedly collect it. Let's see. Anything else? No. We will also need to set depth to -=y so that it will stand out in front of things behind it. And that is all we need for the step event. So let's go into the game room and let's place our boomerang collection object there, and we will move our player a little closer, maybe. Just leave it. So we've got the first object done. We'll move on to the second object, which will be the actual boomerang projectile. This will function like a standard bullet object. Whereas it will create, it will travel, and then it will either destroy or return. So we're going to add a create event, a step event, and an animation end event. In our create event, we'll need the following code. These variables are for movement and attack power. Here we set the direction based on the global direction, so it will go up, down, left, or right based on the global direction, which in my project is determined by the direction the player is facing. In the step event, we will put this. Now what this will do is if move equals 2, then, if move equals 1, then obviously the direction is pointed up. So when our boomerang creates, it will go flying upwards at an image speed of 2. So it will be y -=15. Then we will copy and paste this 4 times and make the necessary necessary changes for move to go from 1 to 4. We will also change the X and Y here so that it will go up, down, left, and right. And we'll note that in the green. Back into the step, we'll need to put this piece of code. And that's it. All this does is tell it that if it has reached the collision point or collision object and the return boomerang does not exist, to destroy itself and create the return boomerang. We'll go into our animation end and put similar code. At animation end, if our return object does not exist, then we want to destroy our initial boomerang and create the return object. I haven't created it yet, so the name's going to be in blue, but that will change later. Now, on to creating our return object. We'll put this piece of code in the step. Oh wait, this is create. Control X cut. Control V paste. Pay attention to your tabs, very important. Here, we're just going to do a very simple if instance exists, O player, and distance to object, O player, is less than range, then point direction, or vardir equals point direction, which tells our return object which direction it should be going, and we will have that set to return to the player's X and Y. For graphical purposes, you can change that later, because on my project the origin of my player is at the very bottom center, so having point direction go to player XY is going to send our return boomerang to our player's feet. We'll put these variables here. Put this here. If our return object touches our player, then it will instance destroy itself. Should probably do the create event. Here are the variables for the create event. It's pretty similar to the other boomerang object. Make the necessary corrections and we will run our project and test our new boomerang. So here we are. Here's our player. Here's our boomerang object on the floor. Going to collect it. It should destroy itself. But in my project, you have to actually select boomerang as your weapon. So I will do that now. And then I will test my boomerang by firing it in the 4 directions I've given it. There are a few other things I should probably show you so that this will make a little more sense, such as how the boomerang is activated. I don't really need to show you that. In the player step event, the player is told if a button is pressed, then create the boomerang. Also in the player's step, and also in the player's create, global.dir is altered based on the direction player is facing. So if player is facing right, global.dir will equal 2. And so if the bullet is created, then it will go flying to the right. Well, thank you for watching this project. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you find this useful.